Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you another Dragon Ball Z segment on what if Goku held on to Raditz's tail as requested by Geekdom 101. Now we know that in the series that Goku let go of Raditz's tail, entrusting Raditz to leave Earth, but if Goku held on and allowed Piccolo to kill him without sacrificing himself, this would significantly alter the events of the Dragon Ball series that we know. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video, as I will be discussing the altered events, the social interactions that would change between characters, and whether or not Goku holding on to Raditz's tail would improve or hurt and hinder the history of Dragon Ball. So let's start off by discussing the direct effect on the altered events. If Goku held on to Raditz's tail, Piccolo would then proceed to kill him with the Makanko Sappo, also referred to as the Special Beam Cannon. Yes, Geekdom, I used the original name for you. Either way, however, there are two differences. One obvious difference is that Goku would still be alive. The other is the fact that since Goku would have not died, Piccolo would not have told Raditz that they would have revived Goku within a year. Because Piccolo wouldn't spread that information, that would lead to the Saiyans, Vegeta, and Nappa never receiving information about Raditz dying, and also receiving information about the Dragon Balls. Now, I know that many of you are probably thinking that the Saiyans may still go to Earth because of the fact that even though Raditz wouldn't have communicated with them, they would have eventually assumed that he was dead, considering the fact that he would have went to Earth and would have never gotten back in contact with them. But remember, Vegeta didn't give a flying Nimbus, yes, a flying Nimbus, that Raditz was killed, and Nappa follows Vegeta's command. To them, losing Raditz was basically like losing a more intelligent Cyberman. And also, do you really think they would travel an entire year just to investigate what happened to Raditz? All signs lead to Vegeta and Nappa ignoring Earth and minding their own business. So that concludes my reasoning for why they wouldn't go to Earth. So, you're probably wondering what happens next. Well, because of the fact that Goku would be alive, this means that Gohan would never become a fighter by force, as he would have been originally abducted by Piccolo to train for the Saiyans. This also means that Piccolo wouldn't be forced to form an alliance with the Z Fighters due to the upcoming Saiyan threat, which puts this video in a forced situation outcome. At any point in time, Goku may face Piccolo. However, the four main outcomes include Goku fighting Piccolo, beating him and ignoring him, Goku fighting Piccolo, losing and dying to him, Goku and Piccolo never fighting, and Goku fighting Piccolo and killing him. However, I rule out the fourth scenario because I doubt that Goku winning a fight with Piccolo would result in him killing him due to the potential detriment of losing the Dragon Balls and Kami. So the main three stand. I also think that there is a possibility that Piccolo could beat Goku and let him live, but that seems a bit unlikely due to his intent, considering he developed the Special Beam Cannon to specifically kill Goku. Now let's talk about the first scenario. If Goku beats Piccolo and lets him live, it's very likely that Piccolo and Goku would stay rivals for years and continue to fight dependent on Piccolo's thirst for revenge. However, as Geekdom theorizes, due to Piccolo's lack of friendship with Gohan, he would have remained an antagonist to Goku throughout the series, as Piccolo himself said that Gohan changed him. The only situation that may have caused Goku to potentially kill Piccolo is if he abducted a loved one of Goku's, but even then it's a stretch to say, considering the fact that Goku would face a major dilemma in which he would have to potentially kill an enemy who either killed or captured one of his loved ones, and may face never using the Dragon Balls again if he actually killed the villain who killed one of his loved ones, which is a very complicated situation. So for this scenario, I think there is enough evidence to suggest that if Goku defeated Piccolo, he would let him live until Piccolo challenges him again, or if Piccolo eventually gave up. After this, if the androids eventually showed up, Goku and the rest of the Z Fighters would have not stood a chance against them, regardless of whether or not he ever acquired the heart virus. Now, the next scenario involves Piccolo killing Goku. In this situation, if Piccolo killed Goku, this would reduce Dr. Gero's incentive to kill Goku because he would obviously be dead. However, if Gero still eventually released the androids for world domination, Piccolo and the rest of the Z-Fighters wouldn't have stood a chance, considering the fact that they wouldn't have gone through any abnormal training or the extreme circumstances to combat the androids. Even if Kami decides to train the other Z-Fighters, obviously Piccolo wouldn't want to train with them because he's obviously evil if he killed Goku, the android threat would still prove to be too much to handle for the Z-Fighters. And you also gotta complement something else. If you consider the fact that Dr. Gero over-exaggerated the powers of the androids by observing Goku in the Saiyan saga, if he were to analyze them without having that extended amount of training, the androids would be weaker but still too much for the Z-Fighters if Dr. Gero exaggerated their power level to combat the Z-Fighters to any degree. So that's an important point to point out. Now, in terms of Piccolo killing Goku, I do want to point out really quickly that it is possible for Piccolo to kill Goku and then the Z-Fighters could have just wished Goku back to life afterwards. But I do also want to point out that if Piccolo were to kill Goku, he's most likely going to want to kill the other Z-Fighters as well, obviously because they would want to combat him after killing Goku. And considering the fact that he'd probably be able to take out Goku, Tien and Krillin and the rest of the gang wouldn't have been anywhere near strong enough to combat Piccolo. So if he manages to kill Goku, he could also most likely manage to combat the rest of the Z-Fighters. And if he manages to stop them, there really is going to be no way that I could believe the Z-Fighters would have any means to wish Goku back unless Bulma did it. But I mean, it's just unlikely that Piccolo wouldn't have some sense of them possibly bringing Goku back, obviously, as he is part of Kami and he would obviously have knowledge about the Dragon Balls as a whole. So that's just another interesting point to point out. Moving on to the final scenario, the outcome is nearly identical to the first one. If Goku manages to beat Piccolo and ignore him, it would have almost the same exact effect as if he were to choose to not fight him, considering the fact that they would both be unprepared for the android threat as a whole, considering the fact that they wouldn't have trained with each other, Goku wouldn't have gone to King Kai's planet, Piccolo wouldn't have trained with Gohan, and the rest of the Z-Fighters probably wouldn't have had the same amount of motivation to train, considering the fact that there wouldn't have been an extreme circumstance pending for them to have an incentive to train as a whole. And quite honestly, the rest of the Z-Fighters wouldn't have been strong enough anyways, considering how they performed against the androids, albeit a different androids, even with extended training. So that situation shows that this scenario obviously wouldn't work out to the way we would like it to be. So this bonus scenario is for those of you who believe the androids would have never showed up. We don't know the exact point in time that Dr. Gero started working on them, but in the manga, when Bulma suggests that they use the Dragon Balls to locate Dr. Gero, Goku states that he hasn't made anything yet, implying that Gero constructed the androids in the 3-year gap, which would take place in age 767, 6 years after the events of Raditz. And if this is the case, that would mean that if Dr. Gero never created them for any means necessary, the Z-Fighters would still live a life of peace with no threats to the Earth in the meantime whatsoever, unless the Saiyans eventually showed up, which I pointed out already is highly unlikely. The only situation in which it would have been a hostile environment is the one where Piccolo had already killed Goku and most likely the other Z-Fighters. But even then, Piccolo would just conquer or destroy humanity, and the series would end right there anyways. So really, it really wouldn't have made a difference even if the androids did not show up, because in the one situation where it would have made a difference, Piccolo would have wiped out humanity anyways. Now, moving on to character interactions. Gohan would most likely never become a fighter, and when the androids show up, Gohan wouldn't even combat the androids if they were to show up anyways, and he really wouldn't do anything because Gohan wouldn't have been a fighter, considering the fact that because he would have grown up in a peaceful timeline and Piccolo wouldn't have abducted him, he would have had no incentive or no extreme circumstance to push him into becoming a fighter as a whole. Dende would have never become the guardian of the Earth, and that means that the Z-Fighters would have only have had one wish to use, considering the fact that Kami and Piccolo would have been one of a kind on the planet Earth, and they would have never have had an incentive to go to planet Namek, considering the fact that the other Z-Fighters wouldn't have died. And this also releases us to never really find out more about Frieza's empire as a whole as well. The Z-Fighters would have never have met Vegeta as a potential ally, which you guys would have known from my previous videos in which I talked about what if Krillin killed Vegeta on Earth. This significantly alters many events, obviously no Trunks, and to be honest with you, Vegeta probably wouldn't have made much of a difference anyways, considering the fact that he died in the future timeline, because this is obviously the first timeline that would have taken place. With Goku never dying, the Z Fighters would have never have met King Kai as well, and although Goku was the first one to go to meet King Kai, the other Z Fighters wouldn't have ever have gone to King Kai as well, which obviously added a lot to their potential power as well. So this also adds to the Z Fighters being significantly weaker than they could have ever have been without meeting King Kai in the first place. Since this is the original timeline, the androids would stay evil and there would never be any chance for Krillin to get with Android 18, considering this would have been the first timeline as a whole. Because Piccolo would never fuse with Kami and Nail, he would most likely remain a villain and an antagonist to the rest of the Z Fighters in the series. If he just goes off in isolation and just keeps to himself, it still doesn't help all causes because of the fact that they would have not have been an alliance to help combat the potential bigger threats like the androids eventually showing up in the future, if Dr. Gero eventually creates the androids anyways. It is possible for Goten to have been a potential character in the series, considering the fact that Goku could have still been around to father Goten, but at the same time, it's very unlikely that Chi-Chi would have had Goten to become a fighter, and if he did, I really don't think it would have made that much of a difference in the series, considering all of the extreme circumstances that Goku went through to get as strong as he could have, and Goten probably would have never have been that much of a threat as a fighter even to begin with. Moving on to Cell. First off, Cell would be different biologically because of the fact that Frieza would have never showed up on Earth later on with King Cole, and because Dr. Gero spied on the Z Fighters during their fights in the Saiyan saga involving Vegeta and Nappa, which I have already explained would be very unlikely to occur in this scenario, which means his genetic makeup would be different if he ever was created in the first place. Also, out of the three scenarios that I have presented, the only one where the androids and Cell would have made a difference from the other two scenarios would have been the one in which Piccolo would have killed Goku, but there are certain things to point out. And the reason why this scenario would be different from the other two is because the other two scenarios have the same ultimate outcome anyways. In a scenario in which Piccolo killed Goku, most of humanity may have already been killed by Piccolo, or he may have just conquered Earth due to his original intent being the son of King Piccolo. Because of this, Cell may have never have had the amount of humans necessary in order to properly combat 17 and 18 in order to absorb them, even if they are much weaker androids considering how much he needed to fight Piccolo and 17 in the main timeline, although the powers are all different as a whole when you think about this proportionately. Last but not least, if Cell ever managed to absorb the androids, what would he do? The Earth would most likely have been wiped out in terms of its population by Piccolo or the androids, so becoming perfect would have absolutely no incentive to Cell, and he really wouldn't be able to do much with his power anyways. So guys, that has been my video for today. Overall, when it pertains to Goku holding on to Raditz's tail, it's evident that through logical reasoning, all of these scenarios lead to negative or ultimately negative outcomes. So at the end of the day, Goku actually made the best decision for himself and the Earth to save his brother and then get himself killed with his brother, as weird as that might sound. I'd like to thank Geekdom 101 for sharing his thoughts on these events, as I will post a link to his channel in the description, and I had to really think this through, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, as I've learned that although this scenario is negative, it truly portrays the importance of Goku actually saving the universe by giving Raditz a second chance. In addition to this video, please check out my other what if scenarios in the outro. But most importantly, over everything else, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.